What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com. I am super excited today to be joined by Sarris. Is the baseball analytics writer for The Athletic, previously spent time at Fangraphs, ESPN, Fox, MLB.com, among others. I appreciate you being here, and I guess I'll start with, can you believe we're just a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting?
I mean, everything in 2020, 2021 seems like it takes forever. So I feel like the last year has taken 10 years. So, yeah, it does seem like it's taken forever. Also, like just the arguments between the players and the
Totally.
owners. And, there always seems to be kind of like a doubt about like whether or not the season's going to happen or when it's going to happen. I mean, that's just the new world, I guess. So, but I think that they're going to report, and we don't. I think there's going to be no DH in the National League, and I think that this will go off without a hitch. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll get to like the dead in baseball here in a little bit. I mean, it just feels like there's so many uncertainties and unpredictable things that could pop up. But honor your time today. I'll just dive right in with the question I think as Dodger fans, everybody is asking, which is how good is Trevor Bauer? And I know it's a complicated question. It feels like there's very little sort of consensus given his up and down last 3 years. So I guess I'm curious, in your mind, where does he stand in the hierarchy of starting pitchers? Is this a top 10 guy? Is this a top 20 guy, a top 30 guy? I know he's number 7 in your fantasy rankings, but that's not quite the same thing as real life rankings. So what's your take on Trevor Bauer?
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about pitching is that projections actually are not as useful when it comes to pitching as they are for hitting. We're better at projecting hitters than we are at projecting pitchers. Pitchers change a lot. They change what they throw. They change their their pitching mix. They they can change the shape on their pitches. They change their true talent very often. And I think what you saw from last year from Bauer, you can take the projections, and the projections will look at what they've done the last year, the year before that, kind of put it together, weight certain things more and certain things less, and project him out to sort of top 25. He's like a top 25 starter. That still makes him the best starter on a few teams and the second best starter on the rest of the teams. That's still very quality. And an amazing add to what I already had as the best rotation in baseball. But if you look closer, and this is the kind of stuff that teams are looking at, if you look at shape of pitches, velocity, the kind of stuff that makes up stuff, if you look at that kind of stuff, basically Bauer was a different pitcher last year.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can talk about the pine tar, but if he was doing pine tar or whatever it is that he was doing for grip, if he was doing that last year, there's no incentive really to stop doing that because baseball is not going to crack down on that. More than 75% of baseball, as I've reported, is doing grip substances. And if he retains that, spin rate on his fastball, the life on his fastball, the life on his breaking balls, then he should actually be, like I think, a top 10 pitcher. Now you're talking about a top 10 pitcher. Walker Buehler is a top 10 pitcher. Clayton Kershaw is just outside of the top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches, really. And I love Tony Gonsolin and had him in my top 50. Now he's your 6th starter. So,
Yeah.
And Dustin May, if he never finds those strikeouts and he never finds the wide arsenal that needs to be a pitcher, he's going to be a great closer. He's going to fit right in that pen throwing 97-mile-an-hour turbo sinkers. So, they go deep. I love Julio Urias. So it's like, I love that rotation, man. I think it's very easily the best rotation in baseball.
Well, and that's kind of the follow-up I wanted to ask because, as a Dodger fan, I enjoyed your piece putting the Dodgers 1, the Padres 2 in your starting pitching ranking.
As a Dodger fan, I like when you call us number 1.
Yeah, exactly. And put the Padres right below us just because that's becoming a thing. But in all seriousness, I mean, you had the Dodgers inching out the Padres before the Bauer move. I know that wasn't necessarily the consensus. There was probably, I'm sure you got pushback from, Padre fans, but also just national media, whatnot. But I'm curious, you mentioned it a little bit, Gonsolin, Urias. You didn't in your piece, I don't think you even mentioned much about David Price. So I'm curious what it is you see in the rest of the Dodger group that led you to believe, again, before Bauer even arrived, that this was the best rotation in baseball.
Well, vertical movement, we were looking at stuff, and vertical movement was actually more important than velocity. And so the fact that Tony Gonsolin has kind of a high riding fastball that also has great velocity, means that he's got a good fastball. Now then you throw that that big 12-6 type curveball, that slider, that split finger. He's got a wide arsenal. The only thing that's missing for Gonsolin, I think, is command, and that really comes and goes. But when he's at his best, he belongs in that rotation, which is pretty stacked. There were some risk in San Diego and New York when it comes to injury, where they were among the highest injury risks, and I wasn't necessarily as sure about their depth pieces. Tony Gonsolin is more of a refined piece than Mackenzie Gore, who's never pitched in the major leagues, or even Adrian Morejon, who's been good, but in 2-inning stints, and doesn't quite have the shape, the fastball shape that Gonsolin has. The type of fastball that Morejon has not been shown to be as successful as the one that Gonsolin has. So, and then in New York, they didn't really have the depth at all. They went and traded for some guys. I still think they don't necessarily have the depth of the Dodgers. So, depth, excellence at the top. I mean, even if Walker Buehler goes down with the blister thing again, they're not going to miss a beat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess thinking bigger picture than that, I mean, is this one of the best starting rotation groups that you can remember in the last, say, 10 years or so? I mean, we're talking about 3 guys in the top 15-ish, plus Price, Urias, Gonsolin, May. I mean, I noticed in your fantasy rankings, you had 7 Dodger starters in the top 75 of your fantasy rank. I mean, it's absurd to think about. So in your estimation, is this one of the best rotations we've seen in the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about the super rotations that come to mind. I think of, the Phillies at some point, had some really excellent rotations. The Braves may be building this sort of rotation with the Soroka, Fried, Anderson, and they're supplementing with veterans. The Braves' old rotations. I grew up with the Maddox, Smoltz, Glavine, Avery groups. But one thing that's happened is we haven't expanded baseball for, I just wrote a piece about expansion. We haven't expanded baseball for almost 25 years. And we've opened up different markets like, Julio Urias coming out of Mexico and Dominican Republic and Venezuela and Korea. We've opened up some markets in the last 25 years, which means that the amount of the talent that we're pulling from is getting larger and larger, and the number of teams is not. So I think when I think of like Maddox, Avery, when I think of that group, they didn't have the same depth because we didn't have the same, almost like talent roster crunch where just think of like the 6th best reliever on the Dodgers. Dude probably throws 96 mile an hour and has like a great slider, right? He probably could have closed for those Braves back in the day. And he's the 6th best reliever now. So there's something about the way the game, the crunch in rosters, the talent that we're drawing from, that's going to mean that today's super rotations are necessarily deeper, I think.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I know I saw your piece on expansion. I'm a Portland, Oregon resident here, so we're big on expansion and hoping that we get one of those teams. But let's switch gears a little bit to another article that you wrote recently that I thought was interesting, which is about MLB's decision to deaden the baseball this year. Now, it gets pretty science-y, talking about baseball construction and that kind of thing. So I guess I'll ask it this way. How would you explain this to sort of the average MLB fan, and how do you feel about the decision that MLB is making?
Basically, as we've gotten the technology to track the ball and the players better, you might have heard of TrackMan or Hawkeye. As we've done that, we've realized the ball has changed a fair amount from year to year, and baseball is trying to make a ball that's more repeatable. So there's less variance from year to year and from ballpark to ballpark and game to game. That's admirable. I like that part. But they could have made a ball. They could have centered the ball and made it less variable around any ball.
Got it.
And instead of choosing 2019 or 2020, when we had the most homers of all time in the history of baseball, and we probably had one of the liveliest balls. In fact, we call since 2015 the live ball era. It's like a new live ball era. They decided to center it more around sort of 2017 and 2016. So we're going to take a step back from the brink, which is the 2019. Everyone those sort of jam shots going out as homers. We're going to take a step back from that and deaden it. And I guess I can understand it. Maybe it devalues the homers to have so many. Maybe it will incentivize hitters to make more contact if the homers aren't flying as much. I do think that baseball needs to figure out how to get more balls in play,
Yeah.
how to solve the strikeout problem. So maybe there's an incentive situation there. But what makes me nervous is there's Korea did something similar, not exactly similar, but something similar with their ball, and they lost 30% of their homers. Wow. So I don't know. There's a lot of different. The scientists tell us you're going to lose about 5% of the homers next year. That doesn't seem like a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe that's fine. If they miss the mark, though, and we have a ton of strikeouts,
right,
and not a lot of homers, then I don't think people will find that game compelling.
Yeah.
So there is some risk to this, and I one thing I did see was that the Dodgers pitchers could benefit from this greatly. I don't know if people have noticed, but Dodger Stadium has become more homer friendly over the years. I think it has to do actually with maybe global warming, because it's hotter and hotter at game time in LA now. I worked a World Series game where it was 98 at game time. And so, and you're talking about like October, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
so it's like, I think that the ball is flying really well, especially up in the air in Dodger Stadium. And so, Dodger pitchers may actually benefit more than I've seen some analysis. The Dodger pitchers, @choice_fielder on Twitter, you can check him out. He's done some analysis, and it looks like the Dodgers pitchers may benefit more than any other team's pitchers when it comes to allowing the home run.
Well, and that's one of the things that's fascinating to me is that MLB just sort of announces this, a week before spring training. Like, this feels like the type of information that a guy like Andrew Friedman would love to have when he's thinking about roster construction and when he's thinking about certain players. I mean, obviously it's something that impacts everybody, but there are certain players that will be hurt more or less, that kind of thing. So is that weird to you? I mean, maybe teams had more of a head start on this than everyone else, but it feels like with some of these rules, like not knowing if there's a DH, the pine tar stuff, the dead ball, it feels like MLB is just kind of reacting and throwing this stuff together and not saying, hey, this is going to happen in 2 years, but oh, by the way, in a week when you start, you're going to have a new baseball.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird. We read this memo. I read it like 5 times when I first got it, because I was like, this is so weird on so many levels. It's the timing is weird. And then even within it, they say like, oh, Rawlings made this ball last year and we directed them not to use it. Was like, did Rawlings make a ton of balls?
Yeah.
And you had to be like, whoa, like we can't just change the ball and use it. We have to tell everybody and test it.
Yeah.
And it, okay, that seems actually okay. Maybe that happened. However, MLB owns Rawlings. So what, they told themselves not to use the ball? There's something wrong in the process here that I'm not understanding. And yeah, it is weird to just tell all the equipment managers and general managers, like a week before pitchers and catchers report, oh, by the way, the ball will be different. And on top of that, from the way I read it, I'm not even sure that they will get access to the new balls in spring, that the new balls will be used in spring. The memo says that they will be using the new balls during the regular season. So will the pitchers touch this ball for the first time in the regular season? In which case they're going to be trying to figure out if it moves differently, if pitches move differently. So I hope they have some in spring training. We didn't get any clarification on that. There's also 5 new teams adding humidors. Yeah. They wouldn't tell us, what teams those were, and so there's a lot of different arrows pointing in different directions, and it's kind of hard to tell what the overall effect will be. Maybe there won't be any, and people will be like, much ado, I've done nothing. But it's still kind of interesting that all this is happening so quickly and right before spring training.
Yeah, absolutely. Very bizarre, and I mean, very on brand, unfortunately, for MLB lately, it feels like. So, well, let me get you out of here with a few rapid fire questions. We'll start with a general one. Your favorite baseball player of all time?
Barry Bonds.
Oh no. Oh man. I don't know if
Barry
we can. I don't know if we can have that here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was Chipper Jones when I was in Atlanta. I really loved Ray Ordonez when I was living in New York. But then I came out to school in 97 to 2002. So I saw Bonds at his peak. And he was just he was unbeatable.
Yeah.
It was just the worst thing that would happen was a walk.
Right.
That's how it felt. So I know it's a complicated thing to say and to a Dodgers podcast, but yeah, very
No,
Boston.
I mean, you look at his numbers, they don't even make sense. And I'll admit, as a baseball fan, the Eric Gagne versus Barry Bonds moments in that sort of stretch, I mean, was as good as it gets. And I'll be curious, obviously it's a very different time, but I wonder if Trevor Bauer is going to kind of fill some of that fill-in role. Yasiel Puig, Madison Bumgarner. I mean, there's been some characters, but I think, Bauer is going to be the next one, I think, in that rivalry.
That's right. You're right. Kershaw plays it so close to the vest, and it's just such a normal guy.
Right.
It'd be kind of fun to have someone just being loud and obnoxious.
Yeah, Kershaw and Posey, it's like, I know Giant fans who can't help but kind of root for Kershaw to some degree, and Dodger fans, it's like, what do we have against Posey? I mean, I didn't like Bumgarner, so Bumgarner and Puig was, I think, as close as we've gotten.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun.
This is kind of a strange question. I'm just curious. Is there you're an analytics guy. Is there a favorite metric or a favorite stat? I mean, not even necessarily the most important, but one that you find to be the most interesting and the most fun?
Of the new wave stats, I think barrels are great. It just really gets down to power in a way that it's a process-oriented stat that tells you kind of what hits lead to power, and I think that's a great stat. On the pitching side, I'm a favorite. I love this. I've been chasing a stuff metric. I've been producing it and then chasing it forever. And I think that's really fun because it brings together pitch shape and movement and velocity in a way that's really interesting. But there are some basic stats like for pitching. I think strikeouts minus walks is super powerful. It's shown to be one of the best in-season predictors for success, and it just tells you a lot about a pitcher really quickly. How does he strike people out? Does he walk people? Boom, together.
Yeah.
And on the hitting side, I guess I like WRC plus, OPS plus. I don't quibble too much between the two. What I like about it is it sums up their offensive contributions, but it also adjusts for park, which is important on the extremes when it comes to Colorado or Seattle or things like that.
Yeah, great. All right, a few Dodger ones, and we'll get you out of here. Fantasy-wise, is there one Dodger that you feel like you're higher on than most people, and maybe one Dodger that you feel like you're lower on than most people?
Well, on the pitching side, Gonsolin and Urias, I was comfortably ahead of the pack in my rankings that just came out. You can check them out on The Athletic. On the hitting side, I have a lot of confidence in Cody Bellinger to bounce back. I think he's one of the best second-round picks in baseball this year. And one of the reasons is that I've seen, I think, over time develop an A swing, a B swing, a C swing. So now I think he's got those three swings, and I think he's got the ability over time. He's starting to figure out when to use each swing. And so I think we have at least another season or two of peak Bellinger left where he might strike out 18% of the time and hit like 35, 40 homers and steal like 15, 20 bases. Like, I think he's got an MVP season left in him, maybe even two. So, it's when you're a young player, they discover a hole high in the zone. Okay, they're going to pepper that. What are you going to do about it? So I think we've seen that Bellinger's developed coping strategies for these different holes, and I think he can really put it together and have a great season. Lower on than most. It's a great team. Who am I lower on than most? Muncy is getting older, and he has old people's sort of skills, old baseball skills in terms of walks, strikeout, homers. And his defense at second isn't amazing. So he kind of seems to be going towards first base. I don't know how much of a long-term asset he is for that team. And I think the bottom can drop out. Like we saw a little bit last year, the bottom can drop out in any given season for Muncy. On the pitching side,
seems like maybe David Price. It's just not a guy that I've heard you mention much in your stuff.
One of the things is we're missing a whole year. We just don't know what his fastball velo is. We just don't know, how his pitches are moving and stuff like that. I think he's a perfectly fine veteran. Sometimes one thing that's really interesting to me is the Dodgers bullpen. They threw more sinkers than anybody in baseball. Baseball is getting away from the sinker. Everybody thinks the sinker is bad. And I think the Dodgers said, hey, sinkers suppress homers, the really good ones. And the worst thing to happen in a bullpen is a homer. So if Trinan and Gratterall lose the plate or give up some singles, that's fine. They're probably not going to give up a 3-run homer to lose the game. And so it is interesting. I think in some ways, Gratterall and Trinan are overrated because they don't strike out the guys that you expect them to strike out. And in other ways, they're underrated because they have these super sinkers, aren't going to give up homers, and will do the job.
Yeah.
Not necessarily with a 15 strikeouts per 9 kind of expectation. But you look at Aroldis Chapman, he throws the ball really hard. He strikes everybody out. He's given up some really prominent home runs to lose games in the last 2 postseasons.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting to think about the bullpen in that term.
Yeah. Okay. Trevor Bauer's contract or Garrett Cole's contract? If you had to assign one to your favorite team, or you were a general manager and you could choose, and we'll call Bauer's 2 years, $85 million. Which one would you prefer to give out?
You're talking team perspective here rather than player
team perspective.
I'd much rather have Bauer.
Okay.
I think when you're looking around baseball right now, the hardest thing to move is like a 6-year deal with a ton of money on it. Arenado did not bring anything back. Yu Darvish was not even that expensive of a deal. He did not bring that much back. So, what you're seeing is really hard to move money. With the Dodgers, what's the money? Even if he gets hurt next year and opts back in for $40 million, it's just 1 year you gotta get through, right? Or 2 years. So years, a lot of times are more important. And the Dodgers have been all over this. Remember when they signed Manny for what was it, like $250 or something?
Yeah, and I mean, they offered the same deal to Bryce Harper and Garrett Cole. I mean, they've been trying to sign this kind of contract, it feels like, for a number of years.
Yeah. And I think that it's all about just not locking yourself into the long term so that you can always have a reset. I mean, one of the things is the luxury tax, right? You've gone over the luxury tax, right? But you've only done it for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. What you can do at the end of it is if it didn't work out or if Bauer goes on and opts out and goes somewhere else, you can reset the luxury tax. It's always worse for the luxury tax if you hit it 3, 4, 5 years in a row. What you want to do is hit the luxury tax a couple years, reset, hit it, reset. Yeah. And I think the Dodgers kind of have shown that they'll do that.
Okay, last question. It's the Dodgers in 2021. They're the World Series favorite. So I guess I'll phrase it this way. In your mind, how big of a gap is there between the Dodgers and the next group of teams behind them, whether it's the Padres, the Braves, etc.?
Actually, the Padres are probably projected to be the second best team in baseball. So the closest competitor to the Dodgers is in their own backyard. So I think that there's only 2 teams, by most projections, only 2 teams projected for more than 94, 95 wins, and it's the Dodgers and Padres. I think there's another sort of drop down to like the kind of the 90-win teams, where you're talking about, I think, like Braves, Mets, Yankees, maybe the Astros there. There's a few teams that are the next tier down, but the only team that's, you don't usually project a team for 95 wins. You usually push them all together. It's how projections work. You kind of, regress everybody to the mean. And so to have a 95 win team is just, you're way out in front. And it'll be Padres and Dodgers for best record in baseball, possibly.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I appreciate your time. Again, for people watching and listening, if you are not subscribed to The Athletic, I was skeptical at first of paying a few bucks for a website like that and have not regretted it for a single day. The baseball content is amazing, and if you're a fan of other sports, it just gets basically thrown in for free. So that's Eno Sarris. Again, he's a analytics writer for baseball on The Athletic. You can check out his stuff on Twitter as well. We appreciate your time. Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. As always, we'll leave with the words of Vince Scully.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.